20 years after the alien invasion of Earth, the fateful day of the war had finally arrived and humanity prepared for its last battle. The only way to end the conflict was to eliminate the leader of the enemy forces. For that reason, all the warriors were willing to give their all to defeat him. However, before they could launch their attack, the creature released a massive explosion of fire from its mouth, so powerful that it wiped out all life around it. Among the warriors was Lee Do-hyuk, who was consumed by rage upon witnessing the destruction caused by the enemy. He wanted to charge at the creature alone, but his companion, Kabana, stopped him from acting on impulse. When he turned to Kabana, Lee Do-hyuk noticed that his friend's hand had been severed by the explosion. At that moment, he realized that defeating the monster was impossible with their current strength, and that there was only one way to win. It was then that a sorceress revealed a newly discovered artifact, the Time Reversal Stone. This object allowed humanity to travel back in time. Kabana explained that only one person could use it, and if anyone were to return to the past, it had to be Lee Do-hyuk. Their companions looked at him with hope, declaring that he was the legendary hunter who appeared only once every century, the only one capable of fulfilling this mission. With the fate of 8 billion people in his hands, Lee Do-hyuk hesitated, clenching his teeth. He did not want to abandon his friends, but there was no other choice. With no alternatives, he agreed. Taking the Time Reversal Stone, he activated it and declared that he hoped to meet them again in another life. As everyone smiled, the artifact emitted a beam of light that pierced his heart. The sorceress held him and gently laid him on the ground, saying that she now felt at peace. Meanwhile, Kabana stated that he would face the upcoming challenges alone and that his journey had come to an end. However, the sorceress replied that one last task remained. She then turned her gaze to the alien leader and declared that at that very moment they had only one option: to fight to the end. Thus, the final battle between the hunters and the alien creatures began. After this event, the scene shifted to Lee Do-hyuk, who had successfully returned to the past and found himself in his old room. A wave of happiness filled him as he realized he had gone back 7 months before the invasion. He was certain that during this time he needed to train intensely and gather the necessary equipment to face the aliens. Without hesitation, he put on his jacket and left, determined not to waste time as the fate of billions of people depended on his preparation. 7 months later, Lee Do-hyuk stood before a mountain, stating that soon a portal would appear at that location. He acknowledged that his current physical condition was inferior to what it had been in the past, but at the very least he had reached the minimum level required to be considered an awakened. Approaching the mountain, he observed that within a minute the portal would open and release a massive wave of mana energy. This power would significantly enhance a human's physical abilities, allowing them to generate more energy over time. However, the biggest problem was the alien creatures that would emerge from it. He remembered that the first ones to appear in Korea were giant ants and cockroaches, which were initially easy to eliminate. However, in the present, even 5 or 6 awakened warriors would struggle to defeat a single enemy. Despite this, he trusted his experience and believed he could handle the threat. The countdown for the monster's arrival began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lee Do-hyuk charged toward the mountain, but was shocked to see that no portal appeared. Trying to stay calm, he reasoned that he might have miscalculated the time and was simply too anxious. He decided to wait a little longer. However, even by nightfall, after 10 hours of watching, he murmured in confusion, unable to understand what had happened. Still hopeful, he told himself that he might have gotten the date wrong, so he decided to return to the location the next day. But days passed, turning into a week. Passers-by began to notice his presence and watch him with curiosity. That week became a month, and some people started visiting him just to take pictures with him, calling him the legendary statue of the mountain. 6 months later, Lee Do-hyuk had become incredibly famous, to the point of appearing on television, where many considered him a true tourist attraction. This led his mother and younger sister to see him on TV. At that moment, Lee Do-hyuk realized that the world remained in a strange state of peace, with no sign of alien creatures. After that, he worked as a construction worker for another 3 months. He thought to himself that during his 10 years as a hunter, he had earned countless titles, the last of them being the savior. Now, however, he was nothing more than an ordinary worker, lost among the masses. Unable to bear the thought of meeting his old companions and being seen in that state, he recalled how he had waited 6 whole months for the portal to appear, but nothing happened. No alien creatures, no awakening, no supernatural occurrences in this world. Feeling discouraged, he finally accepted the truth. This Earth was different from the one he knew. Although the theory of multiple universes was widely rejected, he had never imagined it could be real. He wondered if the absence of the portal collapse simply meant that the inhabitants of this world were incredibly fortunate. However, feeling at ease, he told himself that he should embrace the peace of this place and forget the wars and battles of his past. But just as he began to enjoy this tranquility, his phone rang. It was a bank notification about his debts. The moment he saw the amount, all of his dreams of peace were shattered. When he returned home, his younger sister, Lee Jan, scolded him, demanding to know what he had been doing all this time. She pointed out that instead of working, he had spent an entire year buying gas masks and strange equipment, storing them in the basement. Grabbing him by the arm, she reminded him that a year ago, he had claimed the world would collapse, spending a fortune on these purchases to the point of worrying their mother. Internally, on the verge of tears, Lee Do-hyuk admitted to himself that even he hadn't known the world wouldn't end. He had made that decision based on the plan he had devised with Kabona, to borrow money from every possible source to prepare for the portal's collapse and the arrival of the alien creatures. However, he recalled a conversation with Kabona when he asked what they would do after accumulating all that debt. Kabona had replied that by then the world would be destroyed and no one would care about what happened next. Now, following the plan to the letter, Lee Do-hyuk found himself in a world that had not collapsed as expected, with no way to repay the borrowed money. It was then that his sister told him she knew he had been working as a laborer to pay off his growing debts. She offered to help him through her live streaming channel, but on one condition: he had to help her in return. Curious, he asked if she was referring to that strange device she wore on her head while playing games. She confirmed, explaining that the game required 2 players and that she needed his help. Surprised, he responded that he had never played anything like that before, but Lee Jian assured him that he had always been good at sports and games of that kind and that he would adapt quickly. Furthermore, she emphasized that he was the only person she could trust for this task. Faced with the proposal, Lee Do-hyuk asked how much she earned playing online. She responded without hesitation, 15 million. Shocked, he was left speechless until she clarified that this was her monthly income. If he helped her, she would split half of the earnings with him. Without a second thought, Lee Do-hyuk accepted the offer. He put on the gaming equipment, and thus the once savior of humanity became his sister's servant in exchange for money. Lee Jian excitedly announced that they were about to begin. As soon as they entered the game, they appeared on a steep slope. At the last moment, Lee Do-hyuk managed to grab her, ensuring they descended safely. The game revolved around battles against monsters, where players leveled up by defeating them. It was considered one of the most difficult games ever created, so much so that it earned the nickname the Beginner's Graveyard. Now, the two stood in front of a haunted house. Upon reaching the haunted house, Lee Jian grabbed Lee Do-hyuk's hand and asked him to stay close. Meanwhile, he thought to himself that this house was nowhere near as terrifying as the things he had seen in the past. Lee Jian, on the other hand, was visibly terrified. Seeing this, he reassured her and promised to move cautiously, just as she wanted. The viewers watched in amazement, impressed by his fearless attitude as he entered the house. When they reached the door, a message appeared. Frightened, Lee Jian hid behind Lee Do-hyuk and asked what it said. However, he ignored the message and simply moved forward. Annoyed, Lee Jian grabbed his hair and exclaimed that he must have lost his mind. The game was already difficult, yet he had the audacity to skip the tutorial. He apologized, explaining that the message had appeared suddenly, and he had closed it without thinking. Trying to keep her composure, Lee Jian muttered that it was a mistake to trust a beginner. She then turned to the viewers and asked for guidance, since she hadn't read the game manual either. The viewers responded, saying that the first thing they needed to do was look for weapons. However, they warned that the weapons they found wouldn't be strong enough to defeat the boss, so when they encountered it, their only option would be to run immediately. Suddenly, Lee Do-hyuk heard the sound of options appearing. Lee Jian quickly ran over to him, surprised to see that he had activated real mode. In despair, she started crying, wondering why things like this always happened to her. He tried to defend himself, explaining that he had only touched the doorknob to see if it was unlocked. One of the viewers informed them that if they managed to complete the game on this difficulty level, it would win 1 million. However, they only had 3 attempts. Another viewer offered 500,000 if they could finish without a limit on attempts. Hearing these numbers, Lee Do-hyuk and Lee Jian became serious. He told her that they now had no choice. They had to complete the mission no matter what. Without hesitation, Lee Do-hyuk opened the door to the house. The first thing they saw inside was the body of a man hanging upside down from the ceiling. The moment Lee Jian laid eyes on it, she screamed and clung tightly to Lee Do-hyuk. The viewers laughed at her reaction and informed them that they could find a weapon and an axe on the corpse. As expected, Lee Do-hyuk discovered the weapons. He handed the gun to Lee Jian, but she hesitated, saying she wasn't good with firearms. He then asked if she knew how to wield an axe, reminding her that she would have to get very close to the monsters to use it. Lee Jian replied that she had always dreamed of wielding weapons in battle. However, before she could finish her sentence, they were suddenly ambushed by a horde of monsters. Lee Jian panicked and started screaming. But as she watched Lee Do-hyuk fight, she noticed something surprising. He was attacking the monsters too. The viewers were astonished by his combat skills. With a swift movement, he effortlessly cut off one of the creature's arms. Then he grabbed the severed limb and shoved it into the monster's mouth, killing it instantly. The viewers were in disbelief at how quickly he had defeated it on his own. The moment the monster fell, even more creatures emerged to attack him. But Lee Do-hyuk showed no fear. He charged straight into battle, cutting down the enemies with incredible speed, so fast that the viewers could barely keep up with what was happening. They commented that they had never seen anyone perform such moves before. With the monsters defeated, Lee Do-hyuk turned to Lee Jian and remarked that she must have been terrified. However, before he could get any closer, she suddenly shot him in the head. Lee Do-hyuk died instantly. Desperate, Lee Jian ran to him, screaming that she hadn't meant to do it. The mission failed since one of the players had died. The scene shifted to a large building where a streamer specializing in horror games screamed in frustration. The best he had managed so far was defeating only 2 monsters. Meanwhile, Lee Do-hyuk had eliminated 4 using just an axe. Intrigued, the streamer began searching for for information about him, wanting to know who this skilled player was. Back in the game, Lee Do-hyuk and Lee Jian re-entered after the accidental death. She tried to apologize, seeing that he looked extremely irritated. However, he replied that he was now calmer and admitted that it had been his fault from the beginning. He explained that his mistake was allowing an idiot like her to wield a gun. Lee Jian apologized again, promising she wouldn't do it again. But he simply turned his back on her, saying there won't be a next time. Instructing her to follow him, he warned that he would be moving quickly. Annoyed, Lee Jian crossed her arms and grumbled that she wanted to see how he would handle everything without her help. Once again, Lee Do-hyuk swiftly eliminated all the monsters. He even carried Lee Jian along with him. Afterward, he told the viewers that when she stayed out of the way, he was able to kill the enemies even faster. Turning to Lee Jian, he stated that he had proven he could handle the monsters alone. So from now on, they would divide the roles in the game. Lee Jian didn't understand what he meant by divide roles. He then explained that he would be responsible for weapons, combat, material collection, and exploration. She asked what her role would be since he was doing practically everything. Without hesitation, he replied that her only job was to stay quiet and support him. Lee Jian didn't like that answer. Irritated, she insisted that this was her game too, and that she couldn't just sit and watch. But Lee Do-hyuk ignored her and moved forward. As soon as he opened the next door and entered, he was confronted by a massive monster, the room's boss. Upon seeing it, Lee Jian panicked and without thinking pushed Lee Do-hyuk toward the creature. He yelled in fury, demanding to know what kind of foolish move that was. Meanwhile, the viewers burst into laughter, convinced that they were about to lose again. However, at the last second, Lee Do-hyuk dodged the boss's attack and slid across the floor. Then he struck the monster's leg with the axe, causing it to collapse. The instant the creature fell, he quickly jumped onto its back and began striking it repeatedly. He murmured to himself that a monster like this was nothing compared to the ones he had faced in the past. However, he soon realizes that the boss's skin is incredibly tough, making it difficult for the axe to penetrate. The spectators comment that no one can pierce this boss's skin with a regular axe. That's why beginners usually flee when facing him. Frustrated, Lee Do-hyuk shouts that if his axe doesn't work, he has no other choice. With all his strength, he stomps on the weapon's handle, driving the blade deeper into the monster's body. The brute force he employs manages to tear through the creature's tough skin. The spectators, including Lee Jian, are shocked. They never imagined that someone would defeat the boss this way. However, for Lee Do-hyuk, this is nothing impressive. He simply questions why they are so surprised, insisting that the boss was never difficult to begin with. The spectators respond by telling Lee Do-hyuk that this boss is usually only defeated by professional players after gathering a large arsenal of weapons. Even then, it remains a tough challenge. They then accuse Lee Jian of deceiving them, claiming that her brother is actually a professional. Lee Jian yells in protest, insisting that her brother is just a beginner who has never played a game like this before. She then asks Lee Do-hyuk to open his stats window so they can verify her claim. When he does, it reveals that he has only played for 6 hours, but the spectators completely ignore the playtime upon seeing his stats. With 134 points, an incredibly high number, considering the historical record is 147, the spectators are stunned. Upon checking the details, they discover that he ranks among the top 100% in every attribute. Lee Do-hyuk, now visibly pleased, declares that he is finally reaping the rewards of his many years of training. Meanwhile, Lee Jian looks at him with pity, wondering what kind of people he must have trained with to become like this. She approaches him and asks if they at least let him eat decent meals. Lee Do-hyuk looks at her, confused, but she continues speaking, now in a sad tone, saying that from now on, she will always treat him kindly. Shortly after, both of them receive a donation of 10,000 from a spectator named Black Orc, the first player to unlock the game's secret route. Lee Do-hyuk asks what they mean by secret route. They explain that this path only opens after defeating the boss, as most players in the normal storyline fail to do so. Black Orc was the first person to succeed after 7 attempts in which he tried all kinds of weapons in the game. Lee Do-hyuk remarks that 7 attempts sound like a lot, adding that not everyone is skilled at games, which is why it took so long. This statement deeply offends Black Orc, who considers himself a professional player. He then adds that he can't believe someone who has never played this kind of game defeated the boss with just an axe. He admits that at first he had planned to stop watching, but after seeing that, he changed his mind. He then sends another 10,000 and tells Lee Do-hyuk that he has a mission for him. Lee Jian immediately asks about the details of the mission, and Black Orc explains that the challenge is for Lee Do-hyuk to complete the game using only an axe. If he succeeds, he will earn 1 million won. The moment Lee Jian hears that number, she jumps with excitement, and Lee Do-hyuk agrees to the challenge. The spectators comment that this mission will be incredibly difficult due to the wide variety of monsters in the game. Black Orc, believing the challenge is impossible, suggests that Lee Do-hyuk use a chainsaw or a bow instead of the axe. However, Lee Do-hyuk accidentally presses the button to accept the challenge, which infuriates Lee Jian. Now they are forced to complete the game using only the axe. Lee Do-hyuk tries to explain that he didn't mean to accept the challenge, but soon the two begin advancing, swiftly attacking the monsters. He assures Lee Jian that he will complete the mission. Eventually, they reach Igran, the second boss of the game, known for his incredible speed. While watching, Black Orc comments that the chainsaw Igran wields is extremely powerful and his attack patterns are highly complex. He explains that the proper strategy to defeat him requires one player to distract him with a firearm while the other attacks his weak points. According to him, this is the only viable way to win, and both players must participate in combat. Back in the game, Lee Do-hyuk delivers a powerful blow to Agrand's leg, making him scream in pain. Lee Do-hyuk then mocks Black Orc's strategy, saying that in his time, if they didn't have weapons, they fought with their bare hands. If there was no path, he would carve one for himself. Besides, he was the best monster hunter. Disregarding the mentioned strategy, he states that nothing compares to his 20 years of real-world experience. He considers conventional strategies a joke. He then says that if the enemy relies on speed, the solution is simple: destroy the source of that speed. Lee Do-hyuk strikes Agrand's leg with a strong blow and kicks him to destabilize him, preparing to attack his weak spot on the neck. He explains that for humanoid monsters, that is the weak point. With incredible speed, he rushes toward Agrand and with a powerful axe strike attempts to defeat him. However, Agrand blocks the attack with his arm, causing the axe to lodge into his flesh. Agrand then launches a quick counterattack with his chainsaw. Lee Jin panics, fearing that her brother is about to be killed. At the last second, Lee Do-hyuk dodges the attack and jumps onto Egan's arm, the one holding the chainsaw. With impressive strength, he bends the weapon. Sensing danger, Egan instinctively tries to protect his head with his other hand. However, with a determined look, Lee Do-hyuk states that if an opponent's defense is strong, he simply needs to attack with even more force. Using the bent chainsaw as leverage under his foot, he propels himself forward at an astonishing speed. Moving at an incredible pace, he delivers a decisive blow, cutting off Egan's head with a single strike. After the battle, he casually comments that there must have been some trick involved in the fight. Lee Jin runs toward him excitedly, exclaiming that they successfully defeated the Bola Lo. The Black Orc then sends a sum of money to Lee Do-hyuk and asks him to explain how he defeated Egan. Lee responds that it was much simpler than everyone imagined. He explains that he analyzed the direction and speed of Egan's leg movements, targeting the leg that remained still during attacks, which significantly reduced his speed. Additionally, he observed the movement of Egan's shoulders and hands, allowing him to predict the next attack. Thus, he dodged the strike and counterattacked with extreme force. The spectators, amazed, comment that the strategy was incredible. However, Lee simply responds that, in reality, it was easier than it seemed. When asked if he could dodge bullets in the same way, he explains that it's actually even simpler since bullets follow a straight trajectory. He says he can avoid them by watching the direction of the gun barrel or even deflect them with his axe. The spectators, impressed, conclude that he is probably the only one capable of such a feat. Lee Jan calls him, informing him that she found a path leading downward. They start descending the stairs, and Lee Jan mentions having found another weapon for him. Upon taking her axe, Lee comments that it reminds him of the times when he used this type of weapon to defeat countless monsters. However, Lee Jan quickly warns him about approaching monsters. Turning around, he finds himself face to face with a massive horde of zombies. Despite the threat, he remains unfazed and begins decapitating them one by one, leaving the spectators in disbelief. They can hardly believe these are enhanced zombies, especially after seeing how easily Lee defeats them. He explains that it's nothing complicated. He simply dodges their attacks first and then focuses his strength on their weak points, specifically their necks. The spectators, still shocked, comment on the difficulty level of the stage, emphasizing that there were supposed to be only 10 zombies, not this overwhelming number. Lee, smiling, remarks that he will just have to try a little harder to take care of them all. He then starts spinning at an incredible speed, cutting down a large number of zombies at once. However, the strategy has a downside. It leaves Lee extremely dizzy. After finishing off the horde, Lee Jian approaches and reveals that she found a document detailing a cure that could end the crisis that turned humans into zombies. She opens the notebook but struggles to read it due to the bloodstains. Even so, she manages to decipher a part explaining that the outbreak was caused by a mutant strain and that the antidote is inside a car parked at the entrance of the haunted house. All they need to do is recover the antidote scattered around the house, and once dispersed, it will weaken all the zombies. Lee states that it doesn't seem complicated and says it's worth a try. Lee Jin, however, looks uneasy, fearing they might lose everything they have gained so far. Lee reassures her, saying they would have to face the zombies anyway to move forward. The Black Orc then sends another 10,000 coins and challenges them to defeat the next boss without using the antidote. Knowing there's money at stake, both Lee Do-hyuk and Lee Jan agree without hesitation. Upon reaching the lowest level of the building, they discover that the ground is cracked. Lee Do-hyuk tells Lee Jan that they probably need to jump through the fissure. He carries her on his back and leaps into the hole. They land in the underground area, and the moment they arrive, an unbearable stench fills the air. Lee Do-hyuk comments that this brings back memories of when he used to hide in the sewers to escape alien creatures. Suddenly, a sewer rat appears, causing Lee Jan to panic, while Lee Do-hyuk, in contrast, looks extremely happy. He remarks that if he uses it to make soup, the taste will be amazing. However, they are soon surrounded by an army of giant rats, further increasing Lee Jan's fear. Lee Do-hyuk, on the other hand, faces them with pure excitement and starts killing them one by one, delighted at the idea that you will get to eat their meat. As he prepares to take a bite, Lee Jan screams at him, insisting that he must have lost his mind to want to eat rat meat. He ignores her, but the moment he is about to bite, a monstrous creature appears and snatches the piece of meat from his hand. Two monsters appear. Both are game bosses, and the spectators are shocked as they weren't supposed to be in this stage. Lee Jan panics and begs Lee Do-hyuk to run away since they are now facing two bosses at the same time. Lee Do-hyuk, still mourning the loss of his meat, shows no concern over the presence of the monsters. He looks at them with tears in his eyes, outraged that they ruined his meal. The battle begins as Lee Jan comments that it must be a game error, causing two bosses to appear. The Black Orc explains that in real mode, difficulty adjusts based on the player's strength. Since Lee Do-hyuk's stats have surpassed normal limits, the challenge is increased significantly. One of the monsters attacks Lee Do-hyuk, slamming him against the wall. The spectators comment that facing two of these monsters at the same time is extremely difficult even for someone as strong as him. However, Lee Do-hyuk reassures them, saying he is fine and fully capable of handling the situation. He attacks again, tearing through the monsters' bodies, commenting that things are finally getting interesting. However, the monsters have an incredible regeneration ability. Additionally, one of them emits a toxic gas from its mouth. Lee Jan warns him that the gas will poison them, giving them only 10 minutes before they die. The situation becomes even more difficult. Lee Do-hyuk declares that if the monsters can regenerate, he will keep destroying them until they lose that ability. Even after decapitating them, they regenerate again. Lee Jan screams in terror as she sees the bodies returning to their original state. One of the monsters lunges at her, while the other attacks Lee Do-hyuk. He realizes that their weak point might be the heart, so he cuts off one of the monster's arms to get closer. He delivers a powerful blow to the creature's face, slamming it to the ground. Immediately after, he slashes its chest, attempting to rip out its heart. Before he can do so, the other monster attacks him. Lee Jan screams to warn him. Lee Do-hyuk dodges just in time, and the monster ends up killing his own companion by mistake. Seizing the opportunity, Lee Do-hyuk jumps onto the remaining monster and strikes a direct blow to its head. The impact is so powerful that his axe slices it in half. Lee Jan, completely in disbelief, watches as her brother defeats both monsters on his own. She turns to the spectators and declares that after such an incredible performance, they should send donations for the show. The donations pour in an overwhelming amount. Lee Do-hyuk is shocked, unable to believe how much money they made in just one day. Lee Jan asks what he wants to do next and if he plans to continue playing. He responds that they've already been playing for 8 hours, which is more than enough. He decides to log off and continue the next day. The spectators complain, disappointed, saying that 8 hours is too short. Lee Do-hyuk explains that his concentration is decreasing, and besides, this is the first time he has used a virtual reality device. He promises that next time he will continue the game. Before saying goodbye, the Black Orc comments that Lee Do-hyuk's skills are truly impressive. He says he can't imagine how he would perform in other games if he is already this incredible in this one. With a challenging look, he states that Lee Do-hyuk should not hesitate, as the spectators want to see him challenge him to a match. Lee Jan continues, saying that if their parents had listened to the coach back then, Lee Do-hyuk would have won at least 1 or 2 Olympic medals. She adds that they regret their decision every single day. She then suggests that since he is so skilled at games, he should try live streaming as well. Lee Do-hyuk is surprised by her suggestion and asks if she means he should stream on his own. She confirms, reminding him that he saw firsthand how the spectators reacted today. If he starts his stream and continues playing the way he did before, he'll be able to build a huge fan base. Lee Do-hyuk begins to seriously consider her words. He reflects on how, before returning to this world, he fought monsters daily for 10 years. If he had failed to kill every creature he encountered, he would have died. But now, after returning to this peaceful world, all he had done was work as a construction laborer, making his life unbearably monotonous. The battles he fought in virtual reality were the most exciting thing he had done since his return. He then expresses his happiness, saying that he really enjoyed playing the game. Lee Jan's eyes sparkle with excitement, and she asks if he has finally decided to start streaming. However, he tells her that he still has debts to pay, so he needs some time to think about it. This frustrates Lee Jan, and she tells him that his debt is the very reason he should start streaming in the first place. She explains that thanks to the Black Orc's challenge, they managed to earn 3 million in a single day. Lee Do-hyuk is shocked by the amount and realizes that he could pay off his debts in no time. Lee Jan then sits on the couch and tells him that one crucial thing is still missing, the necessary equipment for streaming. In response, he brings her food and asks if she could lend him money to buy it. She agrees and says she'll cover the cost of the equipment. Ecstatic, Lee Do-hyuk exclaims that she's the best sister in the world. Just as she's about to transfer the money for the purchase, she receives a message. She is shocked to see the sender's name, which worries Lee Do-hyuk. He asks what's wrong. She informs him that the Black Orc sent her a message proposing a collaboration with Lee Do-hyuk in the game. She tells him that this is incredible, since the Black Orc is one of the most famous streamers of all time. However, Lee Do-hyuk immediately rejects the idea. Lee Jian clings to him, insisting that he doesn't understand just how popular the Black Orc is. She explains that even a single collaboration with him would bring in a huge number of viewers. But Lee Do-hyuk sarcastically scoffs, asking how she expects him to cooperate with some kid just because he bought the equipment. He adds that he has no interest in kids. He then accuses her of being so obsessed with views that she's trying to force him into it. This enrages Lee Jian, who explodes and declares that she should just kill him and get it over with. The next day, a delivery company arrives and the workers install the new equipment in Lee Do-hyuk's room. The scene shifts to Lee Do-hyuk, who looks as if he has been severely defeated. He complains that it's all Lee Jian's fault. She should have explained what she meant by collaboration because his mind had taken it in a completely different direction. He then enters his room and shuts the door, declaring that since he has decided to play, he should start now. As he logs into the system, he notes that he has added another expense to his debt. The streaming equipment cost him 20 million. He then reflects on how he and Lee Jian have been fighting since they were children. However, she has a kind heart, which is why he will do his best playing to pay off his debts and buy lots of gifts for her. Lee Do-hyuk turns on his device and announces that this time he wants to play in game mode instead of real-life mode. He then expresses his desire to choose a game that compensates for the shortcomings he experienced in the haunted house. After searching for a while, he finds a game that piques his interest and decides to try it. However, it turns out to be too expensive. Since he doesn't have the money at the moment, he is forced to settle for the cheapest available option. Eventually, he finds a fighting game similar to the ones he used to play in his childhood. Its price is extremely low, so he buys it immediately. Excited, he enters the game. He immediately starts examining his in-game body statistics. To his surprise, his punch is powerful enough to destroy the ground. Additionally, his movements are incredibly fast. After testing his abilities, he finds them somewhat lacking, commenting that they aren't enough to make him truly superhuman. However, he is sure that his capabilities far exceed those of a normal human. His speed has increased to the point where no one can track his movements. He then declares that he is ready to enter matches. However, he receives a notification informing him that his level is still too low to enter ranked battles, and that he must start with beginner challenges first. He begins searching for a match and selects the character Lee Do-hyuk to start his fight. The scene shifts to a duelist known as the Sword Princess, who quickly defeats her opponent. She wins the match with a single strike. With that, she completes her challenge and earns her monetary reward from her viewers. She then announces that she is looking for another match since she has free time. The AI starts searching for a suitable opponent but informs her that she will have to wait 9 minutes before finding a match at her level. Annoyed, she expresses her frustration with the long wait. She comments that this will cause her current viewer count to drop. One of her viewers then suggests that she enter an unranked match instead. Excited by the idea, she agrees, reasoning that waiting too long would be a waste of time. Either way, a challenge is then presented to her, requiring her to win 5 consecutive matches. She notes that this might be a bit difficult and tries to negotiate for fewer required wins. She explains that her concern about failing the challenge is due to the long duration of ranked matches. That's why professional players usually switch to casual matches to enjoy the easy defeat of beginners. Some viewers mock her, pointing out that she lost her previous match. Irritated, she clarifies that her defeat was not due to her own weakness. She explains that she wasn't using her main character, whereas her opponent was playing with her primary character. She then switches to the character she is most skilled with. With confidence, she declares that she will now show them how true professionals play. The Sword Princess then sets up a one-on-one duel arena, choosing a volcanic battlefield. Her opponent is a character named Hoken, played by a platinum-ranked player. She comments that this character is easy to defeat but has effective and easy-to-use moves, making him one of the 3 most used characters in the game. Hoken attacks first, specializing in martial arts combat. However, she easily dodges his attacks. She steps back, recognizing that martial artists have superior control in close-quarters combat. However, she relies on magic, which means she must maintain distance during the fight. At that moment, she quickly casts a long-range spell. It's a light-based enchantment that temporarily blinds Hoken and then throws her magical staff directly at his head. Shocked, he grabs his nose, which starts bleeding, and complains that what she did was not magic at all. However, before he can react further, she suddenly closes the distance and grabs his arm. She tells him that what she just did was, in fact, the strongest type of magic. She then flips him onto his back using her powerful physical magic. She picks up her magical staff once again, telling him that extraordinary physical magic is nothing more than a distraction tactic. Since real magic takes time to activate, she summons a massive fireball. Her face twists into a sinister expression that fills Hoken with fear, causing him to murmur, "Oh, the most merciful, the most compassionate." He then addresses her as he tries to flee, calling her a cruel person. But she pays him no attention, bidding him farewell with pure delight. Moments later, a tremendous explosion engulfs the entire battlefield, while the spectators revel in watching her intimidate novice players. She then declares her satisfaction in facing an opponent who wasn't particularly challenging. She continues playing in pursuit of her goal, winning 5 consecutive matches. Then the second challenger enters the arena, selecting a character named Steve. However, the player controlling him is none other than Lee Do-hyuk, while the spectators laugh at him as he starts hitting the battlefield ground in a strange manner. He then walks towards the lava, gazing at it in contemplation, which causes the Sword Princess to feel a twinge of guilt. She is about to defeat someone who just entered the game moments ago. However, the spectators remind her that intimidating him is unacceptable, which leads her to burst out laughing, admitting that she wanted to, but she must finish her mission. She didn't expect her opponent to be a complete beginner. Then, with great enthusiasm, she announces the start of the match. Meanwhile, the spectators express their astonishment, commenting that they haven't seen a new player in a long time and predicting that he might delete the game immediately after what is about to happen when the countdown ends. Lee Do-hyuk attacks with incredible speed, but the Sword Princess dodges his attack, informing him that such a strike won't work against her, as she can even evade Hawken's fire attacks. However, Lee-hyuk had not completed his move yet. He adjusts his body position using his hand planted on the ground and quickly closes the distance between them, catching her off guard. She is so stunned that she cannot react in time. He then unleashes an unrelenting barrage of punches, defeating her effortlessly without any resistance. The spectators are in total shock, having just witnessed a novice player take down an experienced professional without taking a single hit. At that moment, the Sword Princess decides to challenge him again, leaving the spectators in disbelief as they sarcastically comment that instead of achieving 5 consecutive victories, she might end up suffering 5 consecutive defeats. But she confidently responds, insisting on a rematch. She explains that her defeat in the previous match was due to underestimating him, which led her to lower her defenses. She then adds that it's impossible for Lee Do-hyuk to be just a beginner. He must have created a new account, just like she did, to compete against the rookies. Determined, she decides to switch to her main character, declaring that this time she will win without taking a single hit. However, the spectators refuse to let her mock her own actions by returning to her main character after just one defeat. Irritated by their comments, the Sword Princess insists that if she plays seriously, she will undoubtedly defeat him. She then draws her sword, proclaiming that she will no longer hold back, urging them to watch what happens next. With unwavering determination, she declares that from this moment on, she will showcase all her skills. She then turns to Lee Do-hyuk, stating that he is not a high-level player, perhaps he belongs to the diamond level or something close to it. She also notes that his playstyle doesn't resemble that of players in this game, leading her to believe that he might be a professional in another game who recently decided to try this one. This time, she takes the initiative, assuring him that she will show him how true professionals play. She then attacks him with her sword, but he quickly dodges by crouching. He then prepares to strike again with his hand. However, the Sword Princess anticipates his move, declaring that she won't allow him to defeat her again. Just as she was about to strike him with her sword, he grabs her hand before the blade could reach him. He then delivers a direct punch to her face just as he did the first time. The same scene repeats as he continues to strike her, ultimately securing the victory in the same manner as the first match, without taking a single hit. The Sword Princess couldn't accept such a humiliating defeat and demanded another rematch, only to be defeated again after he struck her once more. With that, Lee Do-hyuk had won 5 consecutive matches. He then commented that the first character she used was remarkably easy to defeat, while the second represented a bigger challenge due to her swordplay. He added that he wanted to test the game's supernatural abilities, but he skipped the tutorial, which prevented him from using them. Even when he tried to rely on his old magical senses, he found himself unable to activate them. He explained that he had specifically chosen this game to recover his lost abilities and realized that he would need to go through the tutorial next time. He was then surprised to see the Sword Princess returning to him once again. Delighted by her reappearance, he complimented her on playing well and asked about her rank. However, he quickly realized that she was extremely angry and couldn't understand what she was saying. He asked her to repeat what she said, mentioning that he couldn't hear a word of what she was saying. He asked if the game had automatically disabled the voice chat during matches to help players focus on the combat. In that case, she also wouldn't be able to hear anything he said. However, he soon noticed a flood of messages coming in, all of them revenge match requests. He apologized to the Sword Princess, informing her that he had to leave now, silently noting to himself that he needed to leave and find a way to reactivate his supernatural abilities. But he saw that the Sword Princess was still shouting furiously. Trying to guess what she was saying by reading her lips, he assumed she was asking his name so she could challenge him again later. Standing confidently, he told her his name exactly as it was. This revelation left the Sword Princess and the spectators in shock. As for Lee Do-hyuk, he wondered if they just couldn't hear him like before. The Sword Princess grew even angrier and hurled insults at him, swearing that she would never leave him in peace until she regained her honor. She then shouted loudly as the spectators burst into laughter at her frustration. Expressing her annoyance at his audacity and ignoring her that way, one of the spectators explained that it wasn't intentional. His account was new and the game's default setting had the voice chat muted, which is why he hadn't been able to hear her from the beginning. However, the Sword Princess refused to believe them, insisting that it was impossible that she had attacked him with everything she had, only for the so-called newbie to effortlessly dodge all her moves and defeat her attack mid-flight. There was no way a novice could accomplish such a feat in their first match. She was convinced that this player had to be a professional and had deliberately targeted her at that moment. The spectators speculated that he might indeed be a current professional player hiding his identity. Perhaps even Anatoly himself, leaving the Sword Princess completely stunned. Anatoly was a legendary figure in this game, someone who no one had ever been able to defeat. She then commented, stating that Anat's playstyle was defined by his perfection. While this player's combat pattern was completely unreadable, it was as if he fought without any fixed offensive strategy. If her intuition was correct, it meant he had predicted every move she made and counterattacked instantly. She added that such a thing was completely impossible in the world of games. There was no way a player with such monstrous instincts could be real. Then she remembered the brief exchange of words when she approached him again. He complimented her performance and then asked about her rank. She wondered how he could have fought with her without knowing her rank, when he could have easily evaluated her level through the match. However, the spectators continued to mock her, reminding her of the humiliation she had just suffered, further fueling her frustration. Enraged, she yelled at them, demanding they be silent. The scene shifts to Lee Do-hyuk after several hours of gameplay as he had just returned from another match. He then comments that this marks his 14th win before checking his rank. To his surprise, he has now reached diamond rank. He adds that all the opponents he has faced so far have been defeated in just 1 or 2 attacks. He also notes that there are 2 higher ranks above him and assumes that once he reaches the highest level, he will undoubtedly encounter more skilled players. He then remembers the Sword Princess, acknowledging that her skill level was quite decent, and decides to add her to his friend list just in case something happens, wondering if she will accept his request or not. He then receives a notification that Lee Jian wants to play the Haunted House game with him, reminding him of their agreement to continue playing together. At this moment, he accepts her request, joining the game with her. Lee Jian then greets her viewers, prompting one of them to ask if the boy next to her is the maniac who wielded the axes. She confirms this, pointing out that just by looking at his expression, one can tell it's him. He has the face of a madman. This irritates Lee Do-hyuk, who asks what she means by that. She then explains that this has been his nickname since the last session, the Axe Maniac, and that he gained significant fame across all streaming platforms. She then enthusiastically informs her viewers that they are about to start a live stream with the Axe Maniac. Lee Do-hyuk joins the adventure as Lee Jian asks the viewers if they remember where they left off last time. As expected, they recall, and she announces that they will continue right from that point. She then turns to Lee Do-hyuk and encourages him to start, but he surprises her by grabbing his axe, seeming ready to attack her. Alarmed, Lee Jian tries to calm him down and questions his behavior, but she soon realizes that he wasn't aiming at her. In fact, he had thrown the axe backward. Turning around, Lee Jian discovers that the weapon hit a monster. Moments later, a horde of creatures appears, shocking the viewers with the overwhelming number, especially since they shouldn't be in that area. However, this doesn't matter to Lee Do-hyuk, who immediately charges into the attack. When one of the monsters charges at him, Hayek grabs it by the face and effortlessly rips its head off. He is then attacked from behind, but he dodges in time, decapitating the enemy with his axe. The creatures, merciless, don't give him any rest. While still on the ground, another monster tries to attack him, but he reacts quickly and crushes it with the decapitated head of the previous enemy, knocking it down. Returning to his battle frenzy, Lee Do-hyuk continues slaughtering the monsters until he notices something he hadn't seen before. In the distance, one creature seems to be commanding the others. Without hesitation, he runs towards it at an impressive speed and delivers a powerful blow with his axe, decapitating it instantly. He then retrieves the weapon he had thrown earlier and declares that it's time to finish those enemies once and for all. At the same moment, a group of monsters attacks him simultaneously, including one from behind. Instead of feeling pressured, Lee Do-hyuk becomes excited, stating that he can finally continue from where he left off. With incredible speed, he begins massacring the creatures, eliminating them with his signature spinning attack. However, this technique leaves him extremely dizzy, which doesn't go unnoticed by the viewers. Some comment that he is still suffering from the side effects of the skill, but Hayek responds that he is handling it much better than before. After checking the area, he realizes that there are no more living enemies and informs the viewers that they should learn from that battle. He emphasizes the importance of attacking weak points, demonstrating how he quickly defeated the monsters. The viewers agree, noting that the key to victory was decapitation, as those creatures are known for their extreme resistance, to the point that even bombs are ineffective against them. Hayek then suggests that given the way they were designed, these creatures were probably made to be defeated with bladed weapons, not firearms, which explains his ease in exterminating them. However, the viewers insist that none of them could fight like that or eliminate the monsters with such efficiency. He continues explaining that the attack patterns of the creatures are extremely simple. Since they always charge in a straight line, their movements are easy to predict, allowing him to anticipate their strikes, dodge, and decapitate them with precision. Meanwhile, Lee Jian reflects in silence, thinking that no ordinary human could do what he does. The doubt torments her. What could have caused such a drastic change in Hayek? As he continues explaining his strategy, Lee Jian watches him with admiration, believing that his genius prevents him from understanding understanding the difficulties faced by regular players. However, this matters little to her, as long as the stream continues without problems. With a gentle touch, she asks him to stop talking and proceed to the next stage. The scene then shifts to the Sword Princess engaged in an intense battle. She charges at her opponent with her sharp blade, but he blocks the strike and then deflects her sword with a counterattack. Taking advantage of the opening, he attempts to hit her with an offensive move, but the princess retreats at the last moment, narrowly avoiding the strike. Still in the air, she taunts him, insinuating that he might be the first to fall. Without giving him space to react, she initiates an unrelenting sequence of strikes, forcing the opponent to retreat until she finally defeats him. After the battle, she comments that he was a tiring opponent to face, but soon realizes something unsettling. That fighter had one of the highest ranks, and yet he couldn't escape her dance of death technique. Frustrated, she clenches her fists, questioning why the same skill was completely ineffective against Lee Do-hyuk. A sense of confusion overtakes her, as she still doesn't know who he truly is. Lee Jin wonders if Lee Do-hyuk is a professional in this game or an expert in another. However, she is sure of one thing: he is one of the best competitors in the world and could be the only one capable of challenging Anatoly, the best player in the game. She then smiles with excitement, concluding that he must have challenged her just out of curiosity about her abilities. At that moment, she receives a notification of a new friend request. She asks the viewers to wait while she checks the sender's identity. However, when she sees the name, she is completely shocked. Her expression changes to deep frustration as she realizes that the request came from Lee Do-hyuk. She assumes that he changed his name just to mock her. The scene then returns to Lee Do-hyuk and Lee Jian, who have arrived at the boss room. Lee Jian approaches a specific stone and explains that this time she read all the instructions. By pressing it, the iron gate will open. As expected, the passage is unlocked and the two climb the stairs. As they advance, Lee Jian informs him that at the top, they will find iron bars and beyond them, a massive horde of zombies. Among the creatures, there will be a final gatekeeper, who protects the supreme boss of the game. The viewers, however, feel that something is wrong. They don't see the gatekeeper, who should be at the center of the zombies. Instead, they notice that the figure in the middle is just an old zombie sitting in a wheelchair. Upon seeing her, Lee Jian screams loudly, and the viewers are equally stunned by the sight. Lee Do-hyuk then comments that, judging by Lee Jian's and the audience's reactions, it is clear that this old woman is the leader of the monsters. She was probably the first person to be infected, which would explain her ability to control an army of zombies. He adds that he feels as though he's seen someone like her before. Then he begins telling an old story. He explains that after the appearance of the portals, China was divided into 6 nations, and this individual acted as the ruler of one of them. Additionally, it is mentioned that this person awakened a power similar to a virus, allowing them to control anyone who was infected. This power made them capable of facing Qin Shao, the strongest warrior in China at the time. However, they were completely defeated by him. The battle proved that individuals with extremely high rankings had immunity to poisons and viruses. Lee Do-hyuk then comments that upon seeing the old woman, all these memories came rushing back to him. He asks Lee Jian if she is the final boss. To his surprise, the viewers respond that, in fact, she was his wife. Lee Jian then explains that, as far as she knows, if they hadn't been able to save Closey within the given time, she would have aged rapidly due to the effects of the viral infection. Eventually, she would end up in that state. Lee Do-hyuk asks if they had been playing too slowly. Lee Jian answers that, on the contrary, they had advanced through the stages at an exceptionally fast pace. She turns to the viewers and asks if anyone knows the reason for this unexpected outcome. One of the viewers responds with a simple explanation, making them look foolish. He says that they simply forgot to grab the serum and spray it inside the house when they entered through the secret passage. If they had used the serum, the infection process would have been slowed down. However, these foolish brothers ignored it in favor of the enormous reward offered by the Black Orc organization. Lee Do-hyuk then concludes that, if that is the case, he is responsible for her transformation. The viewers confirm his suspicion, saying that yes, he caused her death. He notes that there is no sense in regretting it. Now the only thing left to do is eliminate her, as she is the gatekeeper blocking the way to the final boss. Lee Jian asks the viewers if they agree that all the details of the story should be revealed. Since there are no objections, she begins to narrate the events. She explains that Closey was the root of the problem from the very beginning. She was a researcher specializing in biological weapons for a private military organization and was directly involved in creating the mutation that caused this entire catastrophe. Her goal, along with the organization, was to develop advanced biological weapons. However, she attempted to smuggle the mutation out of the lab to sell it to a rival organization. She was caught and, as a result, ended up hiding inside that haunted house, running from her own organization. During her escape, she became infected. Lee Jian summarizes the situation, stating that Closey was responsible for inventing the virus, spreading it, it and causing all the chaos. Lee Do-hyuk, excited, comments that if they manage to eliminate her, it means they will have completed the game. Lee Jian confirms that he is absolutely right. Lee Do-hyuk then grabs his axes and asks Lee Jian to open the bars because he wants to face the zombies head-on. She presses the button, and the iron gate begins to open. The excitement among the viewers grows as they all eagerly await the final battle against the boss. At the moment the gate fully opens, hordes of zombies charge toward Lee Do-hyuk. He comments that this is the second time he has faced enhanced zombies. While fighting, Lee Do-hyuk comments that if these creatures alone are already so powerful, then fighting their leader should be relatively easy. However, the real problem is that the number of zombies this time is twice as many as the last time he faced them. The viewers start to speculate, saying that no matter how strong Lee Do-hyuk is, he will never be able to defeat this boss. However, Lee Do-hyuk remains unperturbed by their comments and continues his battle against the zombies, taking them down relentlessly one by one without stopping to rest. He then starts to think that the real objective might not be to eliminate all the zombies, but rather to defeat the boss directly. To test his theory, he kicks one of the zombies aside and bypasses the rest, not killing them. Eventually, he reaches Closey and prepares to attack her. However, as soon as he approaches, his expression changes. She lets out an extremely loud scream, and the entire house is destroyed as a result. When the dust settles, Closey emerges from the rubble, being the only one still standing. The viewers are discouraged, believing that Lee Do-hyuk was so close to achieving his goal. However, they soon notice movement under a pile of zombie corpses. Suddenly, a hand emerges from between the bodies. Moments later, Lee Do-hyuk and Lee Jian crawl out completely unscathed. The viewers are stunned as they never expected Lee Do-hyuk to survive such a powerful attack using nothing but the enhanced zombies around him. In no time, Lee Do-hyuk explains that Closey's attack actually had an unexpected advantage. It eliminated all the zombies, leaving only Closey herself to face. He adds that now he fully understands the nature of her troublesome attack, making it much easier to defeat her. However, before he can act, Closey suddenly begins to transform into her second form. Alongside her, the snakes that were supposed to protect her earlier also appear. But this time, it's not just one snake, it's three. This causes Lee Jian to panic, exclaiming that the game is becoming completely illogical. The boss should only have one guardian monster, but now there were three in addition to Closey. The viewers sympathize with the situation, but acknowledge that the game has its own rules. After all, it wasn't reasonable to expect a single person to defeat all these creatures without firearms, relying only on their broken fists. Everything seemed completely unreal. She shouts in frustration, insisting that taking down all these monsters at once is impossible. She points out that Closey's guardians are known for their incredible strength. Additionally, they become transparent when attacking, making them even harder to face. Some viewers suggest that they could just use a weapon to target the snakes. But both Lee Do-hyuk and Lee Jian reject the idea because of their contract with the Black Orc organization, which they are obliged to follow. However, one viewer points out that the contract only prohibits Lee Do-hyuk from using firearms. This means that Lee Jian can still shoot the snakes. This realization makes both of them feel foolish for not having thought of it earlier. Lee Jian grabs a machine gun and admits that, up until now, she had let Lee Do-hyuk do all the work. But at least this time, she could disable the snakes for a while. However, before she can act, Lee Do-hyuk moves quickly toward her and snatches the weapon from her hands. Clearly irritated, he tells her to forget about the idea completely and not entertain unnecessary thoughts. Lee Jian is surprised and asks why he insists on this, saying she just wants to help. He responds, still frustrated, that doing nothing would actually be the greatest help she could provide at that moment. The viewers recall what Lee Jian did at the start of the game when she accidentally hit Lee Do-hyuk in the head with a weapon. With a weapon, they all burst out laughing. Lee Jian, however, felt embarrassed and insisted that she hadn't meant to do it. Lee Do-hyuk then looked at her and realized that she was genuinely trying to help, and that, in the end, they were all playing this game to have fun. He thought to himself that Lee Jian should also be enjoying the moment. Smiling at her, he asked if she still had the grenades they had collected earlier. She confirmed that she did. Lee Do-hyuk then lifted his zombie corpse and instructed her to throw the grenade in front of them when he gave the signal. The viewers were confused and commented that she could throw the grenade without pulling the pin. Lee Jian reprimanded them for their sarcasm, stating that she knew perfectly well how to use grenades. Lee Do-hyuk laughed and added that his sister definitely wasn't that stupid. He then instructed Lee Jian to get ready because they were about to start. Moving at an incredible speed, he distanced himself from her, while the snakes activated their stealth ability to launch an attack against him. As soon as they got close enough, he signaled for Lee Jian to throw the grenade. She immediately threw it the moment she received the signal. However, it hit Lee Do-hyuk directly in the head. The explosion followed, hitting the snakes as well, interrupting their stealth ability. Lee Jian panicked and apologized to Lee Do-hyuk, insisting that her hand had slipped when throwing the grenade. He replied saying that he had already predicted she would do that, which is why he used a zombie corpse as a shield to protect himself. Then he rushed toward the snakes before they could turn invisible again. With precise aim, he landed a direct blow to one of the snake's eyes. The creature was in pain, but just then, he felt the second snake approaching from behind. Quickly, he adjusted his position in midair and swung his axe at it. However, to his surprise, the blade couldn't penetrate the creature's hard scales. Suddenly, he noticed another snake hidden, ready to ambush him. At the last moment, he managed to block the attack, but the force of the impact sent him flying backward. Smiling challengingly, he realized that things were finally getting more challenging. Wiping the blood from his face, he acknowledged that the situation had become more complicated, but also more exciting than he had expected. He advanced again at high speed, noticing that the snake with the injured eye could no longer use its stealth ability, while the other two still could. As he ran toward them in closey, he remembered how, during the alien invasion, he faced creatures with the ability to turn transparent. Compared to those beasts, these snakes seemed insignificant. Trying to invoke the same mindset he had when fighting the alien monsters, he quickly closed the distance between him, the snakes, and closey. He saw only one visible snake in front of him, while the other two remained hidden, ready to strike. Sensing their presence, he realized that two were ahead, and one was lurking behind. With expert precision, he avoided their attacks. Then he jumped onto the back of the snake whose eye had been injured earlier, preparing to attack again. The viewers warned him that he had already tried this before and failed. In response, he declared that if the game were truly realistic, his plan would work this time. He landed a precise blow in the gaps between the snake's scales. Targeting that weak spot allowed him to kill it instantly. Triumphant, he announced that he could now take down these snakes with a single strike. However, as soon as the snake perished, Closey charged at him with incredible speed. He barely dodged her attack, but immediately realized there was another snake behind him once again. Reacting quickly, he maneuvered around it and struck its head. Then he drove both axes deep into the snake's mouth and with all of his strength, forced them apart. The creature staggered backward, inadvertently stepping into the path of Closey's attack. At that moment, he noticed the final snake descending from above, preparing to strike him. He avoided the attack at the last second, causing the snake to bite the other one instead of him. Seizing the opportunity, he leaped over them and pointed out that the snakes only had two weak points, inside their mouths and on the backs of their scales. Without hesitation, he launched a full-on assault against the remaining snakes. With masterful precision, he eliminated both in one strike. Now, the only remaining opponent in front of him was Closey, the final boss. Lee Do-hyuk moved at the speed of light once again, confidently declaring that this would be the last battle of the game. He intended to make the most of it. Lee Do-hyuk defeats the monster with his axe and receives 2 donations from the viewers, who believe he did an excellent job. His sister runs to him, excited, thanking him for the amazing battle, while the viewers agree that it was an insane showdown. Lee Jen expresses her gratitude for all the donations received and thanks everyone for appreciating the show. While holding his axe, Lee Do-hyuk realizes that he's starting to enjoy the game, although it ended too quickly. For him, the real fight was against the warrior, as besides combat, the strategic challenges and mind games made everything much more thrilling. Comparing the recently defeated monster to other enemies he has faced, he comments that, up until now, the game hasn't felt that difficult. He then thanks the Orc Negro for another donation and for not giving up on the mission halfway. Meanwhile, the viewers talk about sending the fight to the Orc Negro's channel. One confirms that they uploaded it as soon as the battle ended. Another questions why they didn't post it on their own channel, to which the protagonist's sister explains that they didn't have one yet. For now, Orc Negro was helping with that. Soon after, Orc Negro donates another 100,000 wons and wishes everyone to enjoy the stream, saying they will see each other during the next collaboration. Seizing the opportunity, Lee Jan remembers she forgot to introduce her brother, announcing that he will do a live stream with Orc Negro next time. A viewer sends a donation asking if the two will do the live together. She responds no, while Lee Do-hyuk clarifies that it will only be him and Orc Negro. They ask if he has already chosen a name for the channel, and his sister wonders if he has made a decision. Lee Do-hyuk admits that he hasn't yet, but decides to use his own name. The viewers begin to suggest various names related to his sister, which irritates him. He comments that sibling rivalry is normal, which makes Lee Jian furious. In response, he says it's no problem because Jiangchu is a great name for the stream. Irritated, Lee Do-hyuk questions whether he should really act like her all the time and to provoke her, begins to imitate her right in front of her. He then asks if he should do this all the time, to which Lee Jian reacts by spitting in his face and calling it disgusting. Because of that, he decides to choose his own name. While trying to cover his face, she complains that her eyes are rotting after seeing something so disgusting. Changing the subject, she informs everyone that his debut will be the next day at 8 p.m. and that they can check his social page to access the link. Before logging off, they wish everyone would attend the official stream. The next day, Orc Negro talks to Lee Do-hyuk on the phone discussing several games. Lee Do-hyuk mentions the arrival of a new game, making Orc Negro excited about the news. He then asks if Lee Do-hyuk has seen the post, and Lee Do-hyuk confirms he has. The protagonist admits he didn't expect such a huge response, and Orc Negro responds that this only proves the impact he had on the game. He also mentions that due to his impressive physical abilities, it's natural to attract so much attention. For that reason, he's considering focusing on gameplay during the stream. Curious, Lee Do-hyuk asks which game he's talking about. Orc Negro reveals that it's Ascension of Valhalla. The game takes place in the 9th century, during the Viking invasions of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms of England. It is widely praised for its dynamic combat and exciting battles. Although brutal, the game also stands out for its depiction of war. Orc Negro states that it's a perfect choice for Lee Do-hyuk to try, and he wants to know his opinion about it. Lee Do-hyuk, in turn, asks if Valhalla has a mode similar to the game they were playing before. Orc Negro confirms that it does. Orc Negro explains that from an entertainment perspective, Valhalla is ideal for the protagonist because it perfectly matches his playstyle. He adds that Lee Do-hyuk's greatest strength is his physical ability, and Valhalla offers both a conventional and a realistic mode. He continues saying that the best players struggle with the physical demands of playing as a true Viking. For that reason, few try playing in realistic mode. After all, in that mode, you don't need to fight a boss to feel the challenge. Even the initial Saxon soldiers are incredibly difficult to defeat. Orc Negro admits that he's tried the realistic mode a few times but got completely crushed. Curious, Lee Do-hyuk asks how far he got. Nervously, Orc Negro mentions that after a few attempts, he managed to defeat a regular knight, but soon after he was completely destroyed by another opponent. Lee Do-hyuk remembers that when he faced Orc Negro in Ultimate Fighter, he defended very well. Therefore, considering he managed to fight a knight, defeating regular players shouldn't be a big challenge for him. Orc Negro, however, feels embarrassed hearing this because previously he had been defeated without even being able to react. While discussing ideas for content, Orc Negro ended up facing Lee Do-hyuk in Ultimate Fighter. As he improved, he became an extremely skilled and unstoppable player. The only goal of Orc Negro was to win the match and get out of there, as he wanted to be remembered as the player who defeated Lee Do-hyuk in Ultimate Fighter. However, the result was the opposite. He ended up receiving the worst beating of his life. Currently, Orc Negro believes that if there is anyone capable of completing the challenge in Valhalla's realistic mode, it is Lee Do-hyuk. Standing, he comments that very few players have managed to complete this challenge, and even then, it required several attempts just to progress. Still, he is sure that Lee Do-hyuk can complete everything on his first try. While they talk, Lee Do-hyuk realizes that it's already 8 p.m. Approaching the game machine, he declares that he needs to live up to this confidence and push himself to the limit. As he begins logging in, he asks his sister if she can hear him. She responds that she can, loud and clear. He then affirms that he will do his best as a temporary manager. Once the connection is completed, he enters the game's lobby. As soon as he appears online, some viewers ask what game he plans to play. He announces that he will reveal his choice soon. Then he asks if anyone has anything they would like to ask. Many questions flood in, and one stands out: why are you so good at games? He reflects that perhaps it's because in his previous life, he was the strongest hunter in history and even saved the world before regressing in time. However, he thinks talking about his past might be complicated, so he prefers to avoid the subject. Intrigued, the viewers begin to suspect that he might be avoiding the question because he's a former soldier. Lee Do-hyuk then speaks up and says he has a question for everyone. He explains that from now on, he intends to focus his streams exclusively on gaming content. Opening his game library, several titles appear on the screen. Among them, a very old game that is not well received by his viewers. A donor questions if he really wants to play Ultimate Fighter. Lee Do-hyuk confirms, explaining that he has played a few times on the console. This brings some memories back, and he asks what they think about the idea. The viewers react, saying that this game is like Trash Fighter, and as a Generation Z player, you should go for Iron first. Reading the comments, the protagonist realizes that the reactions are similar to those of the Black Orc. His sister, as the stream manager, intervenes and emphasizes that Ultimate Fighter is an outdated game. She explains that it's so outdated that people have nicknamed it Trash Fighter, and if he really likes fighting games, he should consider Iron first, as it's the real hit of the moment. Lee Do-hyuk concludes that it's not the best time to stream Ultimate Fighter. Soon after, he receives a donation suggesting he try a divine level game, Iron Fist. He replies that he has already decided which game he will play. Lee Jed informs that the number of viewers is growing, stating that there are already 2,245 people watching the live stream. Seeing this number, Lee Do-hyuk is impressed. With the arrival of new viewers, he wonders if he really is as skilled as they say. Placing his hand on the ground, he announces the chosen game, Ascension of Valhalla. The connection is completed, and he enters the inactive mode. Looking around, he marvels at the Viking world of Ascension of Valhalla. Lee Do-hyuk comments that he has already chosen the game mode. Analyzing the options, the protagonist chooses the realistic mode. Upon noticing this choice, the viewers react, predicting that the challenge will be insane. One viewer comments that Vikings are known for using double axes, and this fits perfectly with the playstyle of god Doki Ryuki. Lee Do-hyuk observes his weapons and realizes that he can now use dual weapons. Extending his hand, he he announces that today he will have a special guest. The Black Orc presents himself before the viewers. In the comments, one viewer mentions that the king of bad aiming has arrived and that Black Mosquito is on air. The Black Orc in turn states that it's time to end the hate against mosquitoes, showing enthusiasm for the start of the stream. Lee Do-hyuk reminds everyone that, as part of the agreement, the Black Orc is bringing his viewers, and in return, he will send a collaborative video to his YouTube channel. Seeing the number of viewers rising quickly, the Black Orc comments that at this point he was more of a bee than a mosquito. Lee Jin, observing the numbers, is surprised by the amount of viewers reached. Among the comments, some viewers highlight that the viewership numbers are impressive, especially for a newcomer. The Black Orc, walking through the game's scenery, emphasizes that connections are built little by little, and by establishing a bond with Lee Do-hyuk now, he could reap the benefits later. Meanwhile, Lee Do-hyuk announces the start of the game and asks the computer to activate Ascension of Valhalla. As soon as the inactive mode is deactivated, the story introduction begins. In the year 793 AD, a great calamity strikes the sacred land of Northumbria. The feared Vikings, led by Ragnar, land on the region's shores, beginning a bloody war. In a final confrontation with the king of Northumbria, Ragnar fights bravely, but is eventually captured. Even while in prison, he shouts angrily, cursing the Saxons, but his protests are in vain. As punishment, he rolls into a brutal blow. Before departing, he makes it clear that his children would not let this go unpunished. The scene then shifts to Jorund, a battle destroyer. With a fierce expression, he proclaims that King Ragnar has fallen before the Saxons, and now the only mission for his warriors is vengeance. He declares that only those who show true valor will be recognized as worthy warriors. He then challenges those present, asking who will be the first to prove their strength before Odin. The Black Orc explains to the viewers that Jorund is the tutorial instructor and normally teaches combat and defense techniques in the game. However, in reality mode, it's not enough to just learn the techniques. One must qualify and gain recognition to enter Ascension of Valhalla. In the comments, viewers discuss the warrior's judgment, stating that the reality mode is reserved for experienced players, and that beginners should stay in normal mode. Ignoring the warnings, the Black Orc grabs a pair of axes and steps up to the challenge. His gesture sparks reactions among the viewers, who speculate whether he was trying to imitate Lee Do-hyuk. Previously, he had managed to defeat a knight using sword and shield, and despite the combat with dual weapons, he might have enough talent for it. Facing his opponent, the Black Orc recalls the times he tried reality mode before. Jorund, observing his stance, shows excitement, mentioning that it's been a long time since he saw a newbie trying to fight with two weapons at once. Without hesitation, the Black Orc charges at him with speed, determined to prove his strength. Jorund in turn stands firm, stating that he would teach him to properly wield the axes. He then orders him to attack with all his might. The Black Orc advances with determination, ready for the fight. During the attack, the Black Orc reflects on the advantages of using two weapons, one of which is the element of surprise. The first step is to lure the enemy into defending against the initial strike. Jorund comments that his attacks are weak and that on the next move he should surprise his opponent with a double axe combo. However, before he could react, he receives a punch to the face. The impact is so strong that Jorund is knocked to the ground. While he is down, viewers mock him, saying this is what happens when someone tries to wield double axes without skill. Jorund calls him pathetic and states that instead of being a warrior, he should look for a job as a kitchen helper or something similar. Viewers comment that being called a kitchen helper in Viking terms is an even worse insult than a direct offense. Jorund then calls for the next challenger. Lee Do-hyuk approaches and asks if he is okay. Frustrated, the Black Orc asks if his axe skills are really that bad. Lee Do-hyuk replies that they are not. The Black Orc, relieved, says he knew Lee Do-hyuk recognized his abilities. However, Lee Do-hyuk clarifies that he doesn't think his techniques are bad, but rather that he has no basic knowledge whatsoever. The comment surprises everyone, as it sounds even worse than calling him inexperienced. Lee Do-hyuk adds that, in reality, he was just beaten up. Impatient, the Black Orc interrupts and says he understands the message. Lee Do-hyuk then explains that although the double axes may seem different, they must be wielded in a very specific way. Smiling, he mentions that if the Black Orc had paid attention during his presentation in It Kills, he would understand better. The Black Orc responds that he watched for hours, and when trying to imitate the movements, his muscles started to hurt. Lee Do-hyuk is surprised by his dedication. Placing his hand on his shoulder, he tells him to wait, and that it doesn't matter how bad he is. In fact, one of the viewers mentions that in Killers 2, he was called a rookie all the time. Another viewer requests a 100,001 mission and asks Lee Do-hyuk to give his best to impress them if he manages to defeat Jorund. Meanwhile, the Black Orc thinks about punching the protagonist, but realizes that would be his first mission. Another viewer makes a new donation, requesting the same 100,001 mission and adding it as a last wish. Two more viewers increase the bet to 30,001. Watching the viewer's excitement, Lee Do-hyuk wonders if Jorund Jorund is really that hard to defeat. The Black Orc confirms, saying that Jorund is a retired Berserk vice captain. As he watches Jorund fight against other opponents, he realizes that Jorund is still extremely strong even within the game. During the battle, Jorund calls his opponent pathetic and says he can no longer watch that fight. Then he yells for the next challenger. Pikachu requests a 100,001 mission, stating that the protagonist will definitely win. Regardless of Jorund's strength, he would be no match for Lee Do-hyuk. Watching his viewers discuss, the protagonist asks them to stop fighting. Holding his axe, he says that winning seems easy, and that's why he intends to test it. Approaching his instructor, he asks if defeating Jorund in 10 seconds would be considered completing the mission. Pikachu doubts that such a time would be enough and makes a donation of 50,000 won. Another viewer, Do-hyuk, requests a 100,001 mission, stating that Jorund would only have 10 seconds before being defeated. Lepeku adds another 50,000 won, commenting that this bet looks like easy money. Some viewers agree, saying that Jorund is not a Black Orc, so he should be able to last at least 10 seconds. Hearing this, the Black Orc comments that he wasn't used to axes before, but the combination of sword and shield allowed him to finish a battle in less than 3 seconds. They speculate that the fight might end in just 5 seconds, while the Black Orc in the background wonders if that could really be true. Lee Do-hyuk positions himself in front of Jorund, who asks if he also uses double axes. Calling him a brat, Jorund says he will see if he is worthy of wielding them. Raising his axe, Lee Do-hyuk charges. Jorund blocks the strike firmly and comments on the axe throw, but before he can finish speaking, Lee Do-hyuk is already in front of him again. Jorund manages to defend the second attack, and as he pulls away, he realizes that the first strike was just a distraction. Finally, he feels that he is fighting an opponent worthy of his strength. Holding his axe, the protagonist analyzes the situation and realizes that Jorund was able to block his attack. In the battle against the Black Orc, he demonstrated impressive combat skills, standing out from the others. Lee Do-hyuk wonders if Jorund improved his techniques using battle data, refining his moves, something similar to reinforcement learning. Standing before his opponent, he reflects that there are probably NPCs even more powerful, but Jorund's real combat experience surpasses them all. In battle stance, he decides that either way, his first goal is to take down this opponent. Holding his axe, Jorund speaks about Lee Do-hyuk's great fighting spirit. He moves toward Lee Do-hyuk, saying he will check if the skill matches that spirit. Lee Do-hyuk manages to defend using both of his axes. Jorund, seeing this, is shocked and does not allow him to defend, knocking him back, and Lee Do-hyuk even thinks that Jorund's strength is a level of his own. In that case, he intends to do something and gets into position, kicking Jorund and saying he will block his consecutive attacks. First, he would have to seal his weapon, and then steal his attack time. Landing his first strike cleanly, without wasting time, he lands another blow. Blood spills from Jorund's mouth. Furious, he charges at the protagonist. Then the protagonist gradually evades, jumping over Jorund as he charges straight ahead. Soon, with both feet, he lands a powerful blow to Jorund's back. Jorund turns, calling him small, but before he could do anything, the axe was already on his head, ending the battle with Jorund. The system shows that the mission was a success. Immediately, everyone screamed that the fight was insane. Viewers comment that he definitely managed to defeat Jorund in just 10 seconds. One of the viewers donated 10,000 won, saying that they knew he would manage it. Ryuchu donated 11,000 won, saying that anyone who thought this was just a safe bet was an idiot. Seeing the messages, the protagonist simply thanks everyone. Jorund gets very close to Lee Do-hyuk and comments that the fight was very enjoyable, and he watched it as if he were seeing Odin's own son. The Black Orc states that Odin's son is the greatest Viking praise. Viewers comment that Jorund really said something like that, even demonstrating maximum respect. Curious, Jorund asks what the name of Odin's blessed son is. He answers, Gunna, the protagonist of the Ascension of Valhalla. With respect, Jorund says it's a magnificent name, fitting for a Viking. A system message appears stating that Jorund is thanking him, and a new mission has been assigned. He hands over a letter, which says that Odin is madness, rules war, and grants strength to men against their enemies. Gunna, a great warrior, as if blessed by Odin himself, worthy of the praise of many warriors. Perhaps the blood of Odin, the father of all, flows through him. The system displays the current objective. You must gain the recognition of 4 more warriors. Seeing the system message, the protagonist thinks that there are still missions to do. Viewers comment that the message has already appeared, where Jorund also offers a mission from Odin's son. Seeing this, the Black Orc thinks it's incredible, as this has never been revealed before. The viewers say that he's the first in the world because they've never seen Jorund give this to anyone before. Surprised, the protagonist asks if this is a rare trigger. The Black Orc replies that it is, explaining that it's not a main mission, but a secondary mission, and not just anyone can receive it. It's called the Odin's Son mission. He continues by saying that if the player earns the recognition of 5 warriors, they will receive the title Son of Odin through this secondary mission. He also mentions that having the Son of Odin title is a symbol that determines whether someone is a professional in Valhalla or not. The Black Orc affirms that this is not the first time an Odin quest has appeared, but as far as he knows, it's the first time it's been triggered in the tutorial zone. It wasn't like no one had ever defeated Jorund in the tutorial before, but he's just pointing out that Jorund was never known for giving out the Odin Vincent quest before. Perhaps the unlock condition is linked to the cleansing temple. Since Lee Do-hyuk finished in 10 seconds, the limit is probably between 10 and 30 seconds. You would have to defeat Jorun within that time frame for the mission to appear. Lee Do-hyuk is surprised to learn that there's a time limit to this. One of Do-hyuk's subscribers comments that some are called Sons of Odin from the start, while the Black Orc was called a kitchen helper even after several attempts. He says this is truly impressive in its own way. Seeing this message, the Black Orc is not happy at all, as everyone is calling him a kitchen helper. He tries to justify himself, saying it's not because he's bad, but because double axes are difficult to handle, and that no one would understand even if they tried. Lee Do-hyuk is simply a prodigy. Lee Do-hyuk places his hands on his shoulders and says that, indeed, if he has no talent, he shouldn't use dual weapons. Lee Do-hyuk tries to justify, saying that he's not saying the Black Orc is bad or talentless, but rather that he doesn't have the talent to wield double axes. The viewers ask what the difference would be and how many times they have to say the Black Orc has no talent. The Black Orc simply gets furious at hearing everyone call them talentless. Holding his sword, he says that he admits hearing it from Lee Do-hyuk, but he won't accept hearing it from the other viewers. With determination, the Black Orc says that this time he will earn Jorun's recognition with his own main weapon. The viewers watch him change to sword and shield and comment that this choice is very powerful. Playing without a shield in real mode is hell. Lee Do-hyuk, seeing the Black Orc's determination, wishes him good luck. The viewers comment that this was the most unenthusiastic applause they've ever heard and the most sincere encouragement in history. One of them comments that it looks like they'll see more tricks than he has. Furious, the Black Orc tells everyone to shut up, saying they're killing his motivation and that he's about to fight. A disciple of Lee Do-hyuk from Onwon asks if it's true that the Black Orc is still among the top 5% of Valhalla players. Another responds that yes, if Lee Do-hyuk weren't on another level, the Black Orc would be truly decent. Hearing this, the Black Orc is happy because he's finally receiving some recognition. The viewers say that talking bad about him was really fun. Another one tells them to shut up and start the fight. Holding his shield while crying, he says to just wait, because he will prove that he's not inferior to Lee Do-hyuk and will make everyone swallow their words. Teasing, Jorun asks if he had milk from his mother before trying again and still calls him a rookie kitchen helper. Just like before, he charges toward Jorun, saying he'll make him swallow his words. The viewers comment that they've seen this scene before and that he's repeating himself. The Black Orc is doomed. This will be a preview of the next episode. Hey everyone, did you enjoy this story? I really liked it. If you want to follow the next part, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. See you in the next story, guys.